Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for joining us here on the program as we come your way, well, quite honestly, 9 times a week, Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., following the news, then Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and our special edition of Tell Me Your Story, Wednesdays at 9 a.m. 9 opportunities for you to hear 9 different conversations with 9 different guests about 9 different topics. A plethora of information that we hope will inspire and educate and inform and inspire you to move forward, to raise your consciousness, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today. We also stream live at those times at richarddugan.com, and we also podcast at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations, and you can subscribe if you'd like. We certainly hope that you will. I know a lot of people are listening, and if you subscribe, click notification so that you'll be notified when a new conversation is posted. And we will try to get as many up as often as we can. We also ask that if you can help us out financially to keep this work moving forward, we would greatly appreciate that. We have a PayPal account, and it's there for your security as well as ours. They'll ask you for an email address to whom you're sending. Richard@richarddugan.com is the email address you want to put in. That's Richard@richarddugan.com. And we also ask that you take time during the decade of perfect vision, and we want you to take some time, calm things down, and go quietly into that calm, peaceful, still place and listen to that still small voice. With all that being said, we have a returning guest. It was a year almost, well, not quite, but 6 months ago that she was on our program, and we're really grateful to have Daniela Bowman here back on the program to talk this time about one of her latest works, High Performance Without Pain. It is a best-selling book, and we hope that you'll get a copy of it. She is also the author of what we talked about in our last program, Gliding You Home, A Dolphin's Dream of a New Earth. And we might touch on that just a little bit later on in the program. But Daniela, thank you for being with us again. It's always a pleasure to have a chance to chat with you.
Thank you so much, Richard, for having me again. And it's a pleasure to speak with you about consciousness.
Well, we're trying to raise it and trying to move forward. I know that with some events that are coming up in before the end of 2024, that a lot of people they're concerned. Some people are frantic in some instances. And, I just have to say that if you're one of those who is concerned and frantic and so forth, calm down. It's going to be okay. We all know what event I'm talking about, right, Daniela? We don't even know it.
Yes, we do.
We don't need to go into detail, but what you can do, if let's just say you're a little concerned, we'll use the word pained. If you're a little pained by what's going on and what potentially could happen, there's a way for you not to control the events, but to control how you are doing with them, right? Is that a fair assessment, that it's only us that we can control?
I think that is a fantastic assessment, because the external climate that we are currently evolving through, right? All of us, independent of political orientation, etc., is ultimately just a reflection of the human collective. But Richard, who makes up the human collective, right? It is you, it is I, and everyone else that we know. So to be able to step back, tune in, and refocus our own internal equilibrium and perspective and widen our lens.
Mm-hmm.
Widen our lens and refocus to where we want to broaden our view is very important during this time, as many things might be falling away.
I interviewed a woman 17 years ago on this program. We started this program 17 years ago, September 7th. This year, it's going to be a rather auspicious day for me, but I won't go into that now. But I interviewed this woman. Her name was Barbara Marks Hubbard. And she told me in the interview, told our listeners, that the process that we are going through, and again, this was 2007 when she said this, we are going to go through the equivalent of birth pangs, contractions, if you will, and so forth and so on. And of course, I've thought about that phrase over and over again over the last 17 years. And I'm thinking, I don't think any woman's ever been through 17 years of labor. And I don't know that the planet can handle much more. We need to birth this new earth. But I think she was right. I think that she was right in that we are going through those birth pangs, if you will, those contractions. Now, I personally, physically have no points of reference. However, I have a mother and 4 sisters. Well, two of them have had their own children. And so I can only imagine what they must have gone through. But we as a society, as a civilization globally, we're going through that process. And I'm curious, what would be the equivalent of the pain reliever, the epidural, as I've heard, for society and our civilization, so that we can have this high performance without the pain?
I just wanted to confirm that we are recording.
And we are.
That is wonderful. So high performance without pain. So let me go back to what this lady said 17 years ago, which is seems to be a very long labor, right? So it is. Right, yeah, it is really in that dark night of the soul, right? When the human wakes up and realizes the polarity between the shadow and the light, the darkness and the light. And of course, light is always associated with love and with intelligence, galactic intelligence, and where we're heading according to the dolphin consciousness, but also light. Light is energy, and it all is energy, right? So the more we are starting to deal within this long birthing process, which is really just a preparation, look at our own dark night of the soul, to take a look and see, Richard, where we out of sync. What is not in balance? What is inauthentic, right? That's where we're starting to, only then, Richard, and only then when we're starting to realize that this new era is not about creating this forced state and pushing through things, but is about creating a flow state. Only then do we start to realize, oh, maybe we don't want to do everything with this whole pain factor of whether that is at work, whether that is in relationships, whether that is our health. We then start to realize what feels better, what frequency is feeling better, right? So high performance without pain really is about tapping into that light dash lighter, TER frequency. So you can dive more into the light being that we are, to create and move about life in a different, in an easier way. But first and foremost, it does require that hitting the wall, right? And each person, again, we're just a reflection of the collective, go through our own hitting the wall point in order to want to take a look at this contrast of the polarities. And there's many. And of course, each polarity, again, has a different frequency. So we all fit into it, just like playing a song or singing a song. There's different, one sings, oh, I, We fit into different vibrational frequencies,
Yeah.
right? So we're all sort of like in this big old human earth bucket,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what soul bucket do I belong in. And
Hmm.
some are just barely figuring that out, and others are, they're already making their own islands.
Well, you have 7 mindful habits that we want to talk about that will help people. And you've sort of described some of this. But the first one that we want to talk about, which is, it seems to me to be the biggest challenge for a lot of folks because they have the challenge is not in rewriting your high performance pain stories, but dealing with the pain stories, dealing with the traumas that have created those stories. Before you can even rewrite them, you have to recognize that they're there. And for a lot of folks, those are very painful.
Yes. That's beautifully said. That really is that recognition first and foremost. You know what? I'm done with this. I cannot deal with this any other way. Just like William, here's the book. Just like
Yes.
William, when he first called me, and then he came to my office. He was a CEO of a very large organization of over 10,000 people, a top level executive, very smart, very personable, but nearing absolute burnout, and the wife ready to divorce him, and the kids acting out, right? Of course, in the book, he's just a culmination of all of my clients, but he is a primary lead. And so his recognition of, you know what, everybody at work thinks I have it all together, but I don't. I'm losing it. Because at this pace and the speed that
Hmm.
he was navigating, and I'm likening it to the world spinning, it his soul self, his spirit was, it couldn't keep up. It was saying, hold on, can you hear me? Hello, anybody home? Stop. I can't keep up. It's like trying to jump over, like if you have some water on the, if you have a dip of water on the ground and you're trying to jump over it, but you can't jump over it,
Hmm.
And so that recognition, first and foremost, to your point, that mindfulness, which is just a tool for presence, and
Hmm.
presence is the first habit, reduce anxiety, pain, and chaos, and what presence actually means in a most practical sense, not just in a fancy spiritual sense. But when he started to then employ these mindfulness habits and tools for presence, he could start to actually see and recognize. But that really is why the introduction of the book does talk about, why do high performers or anyone really need why do high performers need mindfulness habits?
Well, you actually have a CD, if you will, or a digital audio program on mindfulness in that regard, which I want to bring up now since you brought it up. Talk to us a little bit about what that is. What's the presentation there?
So, first of all, this book, as well as the Dolphin's Dream book, is available on audio.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Yeah, and I highly encourage the audience, to listen to the audio, because both books are kind of framed in such a way where you're reading it and you're going to reread it, and there's graphics in the books that also help you integrate. Because I'm very much an integrator, Richard.
Hmm.
I think that's what my soul wanted to do here on planet Earth, for my own self and for all whom I touch, to really help to bring down these insights into walking a spiritual path with practical feet. But I do have, so both books are available on audio, and I do have a meditation CD on my website, vibrantlivingnow.org. And the CD has 4 tracks on there that really help the human to go from morning power up, how do you visualize your day, to midday lift, refocusing your day. Heck, it didn't go the way I had it planned in the morning, and now it's 1 p.m., right? How do you refocus, right? And then gratitude, the track number 3, gratitude is all about letting go, coulda, woulda, shoulda,
Mm.
yourself and others. And then there's deep relaxation. Because what I've seen, Richard, that oftentimes people will just pop into their day without real preparation, without really giving the internal system, the internal meanderings of the human, a structure to focus from, to navigate from. And I've seen that across the board. So that's why years ago I created that particular CD. It's an older works, but it's
Mhm.
still very good from what I've heard people tell me.
Well, I happen to subscribe to Audible, so I get a credit every month, and I will. I think I'll avail myself of the mindfulness program in the Audible format. I've been doing that with a lot of my guests' books that are Audible. And it's really kind of cool to be able to listen to those books that way, like when I'm going to and from work, which brings us to our next step: create healthy boundaries between work and home. Now, as I shared with you, uh, we are having this conversation, you at your location, probably in your home, and I'm in mine. I am at home doing this because there is no reason for me to be at the station because, well, there's everything is in the automated mode and I can access things remotely. But there's the rub for me, and help me, and I can. I'll certainly take any suggestions from you in this regard. Mine is not a job. This isn't work for me. Even the work that I actually do when I'm at the station for programmers. This is for me. It's a vocation. Does that make a difference between creating boundaries between work and life?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Boundaries is a very interesting topic, and it kind of certainly weaves throughout the entire book. But boundaries really is very much an internal state of being. Okay. It's oftentimes I speak with clients about boundaries are not walls.
Mhm.
But however, the more they're just a healthy state of knowing who you are, where you're going, how long you're willing to do it, and with whom you're doing it with. But also, boundaries are an internal state of knowing the outer periphery of your being and the inner periphery, as to know where do you end and the other person starts. Where do you end and your job or your work starts?
Mhm.
This goes back into the over identification with doing, right? And being the human doing versus the human being.
Mm.
So the more you start to know who you are as a being at deeper levels, the more you will be in your doing.
Mm. Okay. And so I do need to create a certain level of separation or boundary, even though uh, this is something that I have been very fortunate. My father said to me once many years ago, Richard, find something you really enjoy doing. You're going to be doing it for a long time. Don't get stuck like me. And I always add to that he didn't stay stuck. He did go to junior college, got his computer programming degree, and went on from there. Um, The other aspect of this, of course, in an additional step, is reducing your anxiety, depression, and exhaustion. But there are a lot of things outside of, let's say, the workplace that tend to create some of this anxiety, depression, and exhaustion. And I will share with you, as you may already know, at the time of this conversation that you and I are having, we are experiencing in California, and especially in the Santa Barbara County area, a major fire. Now, it's way off to the west, but it's almost a repeat of a fire that we had 17 years ago. And it was the first big one that I experienced when we first moved here. And as of this conversation, this is not factual information in terms of when folks are listening to this. I just got some, I call it good news. I mean, it's been growing exponentially, obviously, because everything is tinder dry out here. But it has expanded from 21 to 26,000 acres. However, they still have now in double digits 12% containment. Now, that's as of our conversation here. And of course, when folks hear this, hopefully it's out. Hopefully it's 100% contained and we're done.
Absolutely.
But something like that, that has nothing to do directly with my work, the what I love doing, but has everything to do with my life and the life of my wife, certainly creates a certain level of anxiety. I'm not going to say depression, but certainly I think there's a certain level of exhaustion because I'm sure you know that depending upon what state you live in and what area, I mean, we've been faced since we moved here 18 years ago with probably 12 or 14, maybe 16 different fires that have threatened to come up the mountain to burn us out. And fortunately, the men and women who have been fighting these fires, the first responders, have done a remarkable job. My hat is off literally and figuratively to them. But these are the kinds of events that go on in our lives like this, that we have no control over, that we have to wait and see what's going to happen. And that we prepare ourselves, whether it be a wildfire or otherwise, we prepare ourselves for what we think the outcome might be. But at the same time, how do we, I don't want to say how do we protect or shield ourselves from all of that, because you don't really want to do that in terms of the physical body. But in terms of our mental, emotional, and spiritual state, how do we reinforce? How do we reduce the anxiety, stress, and depression and exhaustion so that, I guess, so we can sort of think clearly, so we can keep moving forward with our day to day and at the same time know that, hey, I've done everything I know to do so that if push come to shove, I can go ahead and push.
Yes. We certainly are hoping that by the time people listen to this conversation, the fires are out. And I visually am surrounding all the areas affected, including the animal kingdom, with a beautiful emerald green, dark moss to be extinguished and to be soothed and to be calmed. So everyone affected by it, including you and all the residents of your area, including the animals, including the firefighters, including the fire itself, will start to relax and feel this calm, soothing, deep green moss over and through its essence. And so it is. But outside of that, me read this to you with what you just said. Presence, superpower, is to disrupt the momentum of anxiety, fear, and distraction by anchoring us in the here and now. It helps us regulate the past and the future by putting it in its proper relational perspective. So let's take a look at a couple of three different things. So
Mhm.
first of all, it's the nervous system just simply responding to the threat, right? So the nervous system is responding to the threat like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen, right? Of course, that's attached to a certain degree of history. Like you just said, it's been 16 years or 17 years ago, right? Right?
Mhm.
And then, of course, there is what you perceive to be the fact, which is this is what they're saying on the news, the whole, and the news oftentimes, unfortunately, tends to sensationalize certain things, as well, right?
Mhm.
Um, However, when you start to drop more into really reconnecting at that point and gaining control of your own state, that ultimately always, no matter if it's in the middle of an earthquake, happens in the now, here moment, right? So to be able to then calm your nervous system and calm yourself and to use the tools in parts that are all outlined in this book, and the ones I'm sure different people practiced different wonderful things, really then helps to bring down and ground yourself in the consciousness that you are okay as long as you are staying, and presence is deeply connected with that, as long as you are staying connected to your own self in the present moment, you will always know the next thing to do. The next, do I leave the house? Do I stay? Do I, your internal self ultimately will always know.
Mm.
And so living in the present state really is, in many ways, it's not about a future or past. It's not about past history or future prediction. It really is about working from it in the knowledge, within the knowledge from the now. Is it going to completely eliminate it? Probably not. But just having that knowledge and do not try to control because the
Mm.
flow is not in control. The
Mhm.
flow flows to the next state. There, no wave ever happens twice, as the dolphin consciousness likes to say. No drip ever happens in the exact same way twice. So, so dropping from that contraction state, right, into this is what I call the gap. To go between from there, the
Mhm.
here, and everywhere, and dropping into that gap state that is calm and unencumbered of anything else but the now, here moment.
Mm. Well, it's great advice. I have to say that when with the very first wildfire that I experienced, it was just after we had moved here in 2006, and I saw this tiny little puff of smoke way back in the backcountry, but I had no points of reference. I had never lived in the wilderness where I was born and raised in the city in Phoenix. I freaked out. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know what we should do or anything. Uh, we have chickens, and I was like a chicken with his head cut off, panicking.
Yeah.
And over the years, my panic turned into, um, at one point, it actually, probably 10 or 12 years in, got to the point of frustration and almost anger. Unless it was weather caused, who was the knucklehead that did whatever that sparked this, and now we have to deal with that. Um, to now it's, hey, we choose to stay here and for a lot of different reasons. And this is the reality of our existence. And we hope and pray. And I have to say that my wife has made this comment on numerous occasions when the fires have come very close. She says, well, for somehow, some way, the universe has created a bubble around us to where we are protected. And it's a big one because it's not just protecting us. There's a lot of other people up here that are protected by that bubble too. And I I got to tell you, I got to agree with her based upon history that we've experienced. So our anxiety and exhaustion are minimal in that respect, which is very nice. But there's another aspect that we need to look at too, and this is another one of the steps about realigning with your values and then creating coherence. First of all, let's talk about the realignment of our values. And if you want to continue using this example or use another, that's fine. But I think it's important because there are a lot of people right now who are anxious about this event coming up at the end of the year. And for whatever reason, they grew up with a certain set of values, but all of a sudden they have been convinced that they need to shift their values to something else, by someone else, for I don't know what purposes. None of this that's going on right now makes any sense logically, but then again, you can't use logic in this kind of a situation. So first of all, how do we realign our values back to where we are true to self?
Well, it all just starts really at its most basic level, reconnecting with, again, your own self, which is why habit one, reduce anxiety, pain, and chaos, presence, is all about helping you to reconnect with yourself in the now, here moment. Who is that, right? And of course, there's so many voices out there. Right? There's so many voices out there. The future voice, the past voice, the political voices, the mother's voice, the father's voice, children's voice. There's the political voices. There's all sorts of voices out there, right? But being able to go into the voice of presence, knowing that you are not your mind, but its vehicle to be your ultimate being, to create your ultimate being and to be your best self. So aligning with your values, first and foremost, has to do with, like the curtains when you go to watch a play and they have the black curtain and then it opens and it closes and then there's the break and then everybody claps and right. So it's about stopping the distractions, taking that black curtain and closing it and taking a look at who is behind the curtain, who is behind the facade, who is behind the agenda, and to what extent have you chosen, or were you even aware that you've played into that agenda, right? So the voice of presence, if you don't mind me reading just a little bit.
No, feel free.
Voice of presence. So here is the voice of presence talking to all of us about just a few things. And it says, I am the holding ground outside of all the particles of time, where life situations and expectations, including the clearest expression of who you authentically are, can come back together. Here, you can begin to reconnect, revision, and solidify a grand central station that oversees undisturbed the illusion of time. observing like a clock on universal timing instead. You can experience clarity and calm as you witness the what isness of life's happenings in your life's reality as it is occurring in the now.
Hmm.
I am not concerned for future projections and anxieties or misgivings of the past. I see it all happening in the present moment as it all is. With me, the unadulterated now, you can be unencumbered by overbearing influences that try to shackle your ability to fully be and stand in your presence outside of time. Patience, my virtuous ally, will help you find me and become grounded in your power center.
Hmm.
Imagine if you were to look out over a calm, clear, and collected sea and stay calm in its waters, even when the rage or force of life's tragedies happen. I know where I belong. I understand my boundaries and stay in my pool, refusing to cross over to future anxieties or past histories. I am the place from which you can share the best of your potential and talents in full contribution and serve humanity to the utmost of your potential. I know we can meet outside of your time projections, and in your presence, I am here always.
Hmm.
I am presence.
What about coherence? First of all, what is it? And how do we realign it?
Well, that goes very much back into coming into alignment with your own internal rhythm again. It seems like this podcast is really about bringing the focus back to taking a look at what's happening on the outside, things being out of coherence, values being, disrupted, outside external influences being out there, that what is happening within our own coherence. How are we vibrating? Where are we moving? What is our starting point? Right? What is our starting point from which we emanate the coherence that we are wanting to tap into? Coherence, cohesiveness, what we are starting to create, that ripple effect, right? So going back to what you were saying in terms of values, right? Bringing the value back to not the automated self, right? Which presence is all about stepping off the wheel of automaticity. Automaticity is the autopilot mode. I actually have a graphic right here
Oh.
of the treadmill. There's many graphics and diagrams in this particular book that talk about in presence about the consequences of disconnection, your disconnection. We're looking at the external landscape, at the political climate of disconnection, and going back into your what you brought up regarding values, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to start to pay attention to where am I disconnecting? What are some of my signs of disconnection, right? And what are some of these signs? Burnout, overthinking, self-criticism, self-sabotage, anxiety, insomnia. Those are all sort of some signs, an inability to relax. Again, in the book, there's a variety of graphics in there. Even I had hired a wonderful graphic designer that did a great job. Feeling a mental and emotional confusion,
Mm-hmm.
distraction, that also, Richard, is a sign of disconnection, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't really sing a harmonic song that is in coherence
Right.
when you are disconnected to from your feelings and from your inner wisdom. So balance in that way, to find coherence, is really found again and again only with attention to the present moment.
Mm.
And this goes back into living from, not in, from, in, yes, but from the flow state.
Mm.
The external world, and with the political climate, like you're saying, things are coming to an edge. We're way over there. There's no power. We don't have any power over here.
Yeah.
There's no power over there. But it's about that control component where the ego self starts to contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, being in a flow state does not mean you don't plan ahead. It does not mean that you just, fly by the seat of your pants. What it does mean, however, to stay connected to your innate wisdom, or if you are disconnected, you feel discombobulation within yourself for the time being, that you start to reconnect with that so you can feel in sync, in coherence
Mm-hmm.
with that state of being that will then intentionally guide your doing.
Mm. It reminds me of my experiences with a singing group here in Santa Barbara that I was a member of for a time. And in addition to, and it was a men's group that was gathering, and we'd sing as a chorus, but we would also break up into quartets. I found out in that process that I did not know this until then, that my father was also a member of a quartet when he was a guy growing up. But this
Wow.
whole coherence aspect is very important when you're talking about singing in four-part harmony. And you've
Yes.
got to be connected with the other three parts. You have to be listening to them even as you are singing your part.
Yes.
Otherwise, and one of the beautiful things that I actually was able to experience, and it was so cool the way it was described, and then I got the experience of it, when your quartet is in total unison on a chord, there's a secondary tone that you can hear that is in coherence, if you will, in harmony with the four parts that you're singing. It's incredible when the four of you are totally in sync. That is such a cool experience.
Right.
We're talking today about the book that our guest, a very special guest, is sharing with us, High Performance Without Pain. And Danielle Booman is our guest, and we're talking about these steps as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. By the way, folks, you mentioned it earlier. I'm going to mention it again. vibrantlivingnow.org. That's vibrantlivingnow.org. We will be linked to that website so that you can find out more about Daniela and the work that she is doing. We're going to move into another one of these steps. Return to your clarity, focus, and one of my favorite words, optimism. And I've always considered myself to be a very optimistic person. I try to maintain that when I hear about a wildfire that's burning, 40 or 50 miles away. And it's 40 or 50 miles away. What are you worried about? But again, history, starts to creep into the brain, all that kind of stuff. And it's sometimes hard to maintain that optimism. You want to, they say, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. It's like,
Yes.
I don't even want to prepare for the worst, because I don't want the worst to even happen. I don't even want to think about it. But that isn't the practicality there. But there is this other aspect, the other two elements of clarity and focus that do help us, I think, in being optimistic. And I'll have you talk about that. And I'm not sure if the analogy of a glass half full or half empty I don't know if it applies here or not.
So that's a great question. So let me just share that Now I consider myself, Richard, a realistic optimist, and that is really the truth. I'm quite realistic, and yet I will always see the glass half full. That's just, and I'm very grateful really for that quality. But all 7 habits really help you to be a much more holistically grounded in your and centered in your soul self, living your life guided from the seat of your soul, and with that also having a more um, practical, linear, and also more optimistic perspective. Now, habit 1 is presence, reduce anxiety, pain, and chaos. And this kind of how they fit in, just like going to school, you go from level to level to level, and
Mm-hmm.
then it all interweaves, right? And you pull from whichever quality you need most of. The second habit is judgment awareness. Drop personal and professional baggage.
Mm.
Habit 3 is acceptance and belonging. Transform power struggles and self sabotage. Habit 4 is not just about compassion, it's about compassionate action. Leave no part of you behind. Habit 5, great for leadership, equanimity and communication. Up-level your leadership and productivity. Habit 6, curiosity and goal achievement. Live and work from a flow state, which is why in this conversation, I do keep on going back to habit 1 and 2, because we're not
Mm-hmm.
quite there yet in the conversation. 7, patience and transformation of the ego. Keep yourself on the leading edge. So I have found, nonetheless, back to your question, Richard, I have found that these 7 habits, as they are practically used and integrated into your day to day, is that they really do help myself and others to have a much broader perspective, a much more global view, a much more um, unadulterated view from past history or future expectations, because you are sensing it. You have a greater ability to stay connected to your power center and use your, if we want to go into habit 2, and use your judgment awareness to not judge things ahead of time, such as the fire, for
Mm-hmm.
example. These judgments oftentimes come in due to a lack of understanding. So hence we judge it. And it wasn't there a saying, whoever will judge lest you be judged,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Judge not, lest
So
ye be judged.
exactly.
Yeah.
So in judgment awareness, it's much more than just pointing the finger. Of course, with that, you still always have 3 pointing back at you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But in judgment awareness, again, it is about the book and the 7 habits that I've seen the clients and myself employ. It really is about gaining this greater broader perspective, to rise above just a tatty and have more of that eagle view. So you don't need to go into this pessimistic. You don't go into the dungeon,
Mm.
right? But you can create just a better way, a better level of equanimity, right? And like I love the example you used with your dad, and that found out that he was an acquirer as well, because in coherence, like when all the parts play together of your own self, right? In the way that you then can view and come across, it's beautiful. It creates such a beautiful view. If
Mm-hmm.
it reminds me of Boys to Men, you know, Boys to Men, how they play
Mm-hmm.
harmony,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
probably why many of us love harmony, because it feels good. It goes back into that lighter state of being. Again, this does not mean you shut your eyes and pretend nothing is happening. It's just a way you navigate, just like the dolphin conscious talks about. You go down, you go up, you twirl, you go around, you go with the water, go with the stream of the water. They would never think of going upstream, right?
Mm-hmm.
Swimming upstream. They think that is such an absurd thing, you
Yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And yet within that optimism, Richard, that a certain state of joy that is part of that energy, right? That
Mm-hmm.
again, finding that equilibrium, finding that coherence, right? The cohesiveness, it then grounds you in the now here moment instead of being on the run to now where.
Mm. You know, it's interesting because the way you talk about this particular step, it leads to me, for me, it leads into the next step. And if I am I correct though that these steps are not placed in any particular order? This is just the order they show up. Yes, there's a progression of sorts, but sometimes you'll do them in a different order, just based upon what you're going through, right?
Right. So the book is definitely laid out in a way that present is the foundation of the house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like you as a actually a currently a contractor client, and it's the foundation. This is the foundation of the house you're going to lay, you know, and
Right.
depending on that, you're going to be steady or not steady. You're going to be chaotic or not chaotic. And depending on your ability to use judgment, awareness, it's going to allow you to start to open and broaden your mind. So they are, when I work with clients or groups through the steps, it is very specifically laid out in that order because it's a progression.
Okay.
However, when you work with the book and you've read through the book at least once, you can go into the separate chapters and you know, actually, you know, and learn from them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, for example, this just came to me right now. This is acceptance and belonging, which is habit 3. All battle is a battle with self. So key acceptance insight. The hero disarms the coward. And
Mm.
so this is not sure how well you can
Oh yeah.
see.
Tug of war.
And
Yeah.
so again, acceptance and belonging.
Mm.
And so you will use these you can intermingle these
Mm-hmm.
habits, Richard. And one way that all of this came about, and the introduction talks about that, Richard, is where as a high performing, as a more high performing or high achieving individual with lots of high energy and doing a lot of things simultaneously, I was, and being Swiss, folks may not know that I immigrated to the United States. I was heavily involved in my folks' aging process. And
Mm.
I had gotten into meditation, mindfulness, studying spirituality, positive psychology, etc., a long time ago. However, when I was going back and forth, taking care of my parents and sort of functioning as their case manager, I burned myself out. quite a bit, because not just was I dealing with going back and forth to the different continents with 9 hours of time difference,
Mm-hmm.
but I would also never know what I would expect when I would go to my parents' house with the latest caregiver. And then I was simultaneously also teaching team building, communication seminars, meditation, mindfulness seminars in Europe.
Mm.
And while I was still having a practice over here. And so I traveled back and forth quite a bit.
Mm.
Well, so leading to the book, I ended up being affected by a virus that slowed me down, because as I was preparing for a keynote, suddenly, literally out of the blue, I could barely hold the book. And it scared the living daylight out of me.
Mm.
Because here is the Energizer Bunny, the hero saving everyone else, realizing she's got human boundaries after all. Now, if I would have not had all these habits, or some of these habits in place, I would have never even been able to accomplish as much as I did in that short amount of time, right? So that then allowed me to dive deeper into the content of this book,
Mm-hmm.
which is where, I believe it's in the introduction, this quote came from that, let me see if I can find it. I'm pretty sure I will remember it also, but the quote is, here it is. Because I had to sit oftentimes and just recover. My nervous system was very affected. I could not move my hands. My legs moved like molasses. And people, frankly, couldn't really believe it, because I didn't look sick at all.
Yeah.
Because I have a high state of energy to start out with. So even when I was sick, I didn't look ill. I looked still really good for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this is what I ended up tapping into. As life happens, I have set 1,000 hours in the stillness of the moment, reflecting in its pace, to realize it never seems to go anywhere else but here.
Mm.
So within that, I started to realize the different habits that I had employed throughout my life, together with clients that I was working with. And my transformational coaching and speaking career, I was quite successful with clients already, but not until I started to employ those 7 habits and really help clients get a hold of them, did I see a deep internal shift within people's lives on every level that would just ripple out. And of course, like anything, some people would tap much more into one habit versus the other habit, and needed to spend a lot of time in that habit,
Yeah.
within that habit.
Well, these last two steps actually are tied together and in this order. Reclaim a sense of self-direction and flow. And then the 7th step is repair your challenged relationships. And in some instances, and I'm sure that my mother must have gone through this as well, trying to make sure she took care of herself while she was taking care of my father before his passing. I mean, she was ostensibly a caregiver at that point. And it was certainly not something that they had necessarily planned on. It wasn't the way they were wanting their lives to sort of conclude, but that's the way it happened. And now I've noticed that there are times when, and I don't have them often, but occasionally a little low point, and I'll want to call her. But every time I do call her, The woman is so up. She is so energetic. She is so alive. The woman will be 90 in September. And
Uh,
it's like I'll text her or email her rather than get into a conversation because, first of all, it's not a question of I don't want to bring her down. It's she won't let anybody bring her down. I was conversing with her several months ago about a situation, and she stopped me and said, Richard, I don't want to hear about it. I understand you're going through some, but I don't want to hear about it. And it took me back for a moment. And when I got off the phone, I realized she was right. She was protecting herself. She was staying focused on her flow, her self direction. And it didn't mean she didn't care about me. It meant that she was taking care of herself. And I've been told that on numerous occasions when I have had to take care of someone. Be sure you take care of you, Richard. Make sure you do that, you know.
yes.
And and then of course the next step, the last step here, repair the challenged relationships. And just this is a kind of a minor thing, but one of the programmers and I had a little falling out one afternoon over, I won't go into what it was because it doesn't matter. And after it was over, as the days wore on until I saw him the next week, I'm thinking, I'll text him. No, 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 no. I'll send him an email. No, I'll call him. I finally said, no, I will wait until he comes in. And then I will apologize. Not because I was wrong, and I was wrong in one sense. I mean, it wasn't because I was right or wrong. That wasn't the point. It was because the relationship was more important. And I and he both sort of, we got a little under the heat under the collar, and we said some things. And I wasn't expecting this, but I said, hey, look, last week when we had the words and so forth, I just want you to know I apologize. The issue is kind of troubling to me, and I kind of, got a little bent out of shape, as my father would say. And then he apologized. He says, yeah, I know. I'm sorry too, because our friendship is more important than blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wow, okay. Well, this was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And I'm thankful for that. And we move forward. Sometimes repairing doesn't go quite so easily, but when you make the effort,
Yes.
one other instance, very briefly, I worked with a guy for like 8 or 9 years, and we developed a good friendship. We'd go to lunch every so often, and it was really great. And we produced some wonderful programming. And then all of a sudden, the wheels fell off, and he left in a huff. He was just so mad, and da 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 da. And I'm going, what? And so, we had this verbal agreement that, he was going to compensate me out of his generosity, not out of any obligation. I said, you don't have to do that. I said, no, I want to. I said, okay. Well, the last 14 months that we worked together, he didn't pay me anything because a project that he was working on was on hold. Well, then he leaves in a huff. And of course, a month or two later, I send him an email saying, hey, here's the invoice and here's the information about the work that I did the last 14 months. You said you were going to pay me for, and here's the bill, or, whatever, the invoice. And I get all this static, and I get this pushback, and on and on and on. And finally, just recently, I sent the final communication, and I had to sever the relationship. And this is, I think, still part of repairing your challenged relationships, to the extent that sometimes you can't repair them and you have to let them go. And that's what I told at the end of the email. I said, please do not reply to this. I am removing you from my contacts and my email list and so forth, because I cannot have in my life people who do not honor their word, and they're not honorable. They don't mean what they say. They don't mean what they say. They don't do what they say. And of course, I haven't heard from him, and I don't expect to ever see those funds. And you know what? That's okay. you know? I mean, it was a good chunk of change, but and I've had other people say, well, you can write that off on your taxes if you have the invoice or what have you, da 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 da. It's like, well, okay, I may do that. It may help, but that wasn't the point of it. It was I even told him in it, I said, look, I was really hurt by all of this. This pained me that and not because you're not paying me, but because of the relationship being severed. And it's a disheartening. And I would have to say what? There's a certain sense of grief there, right?
Of course.
So
Yes.
those two things, taking care of self and then reclaiming relationships, challenged
Yes.
relationships. Talk about those as we wrap things up here.
Well, so thank you for sharing that. I send healing to you and to the other gentleman.
Thank you.
It's good to allow these karmic ties to fall away in a way that, and they do when done with integrity. And then you can let them go,
Mhm.
you know? Um, Even though it may not feel very good at the time being, for the time being. But so repairing challenged relationships, reclaiming a sense of self-direction and flow. So these 7 habits, which the subtitle of the book is a 7-step blueprint to reclaim your vibrant life and get even more done, right? And vibrant meaning there's a pulse, there is a life, there is a
Mm.
all 7 habits, Richard, are their qualities. They are certain character qualities, and I have found and encourage the watcher, the listener, whether it's today or perhaps 10 years from today. It's 2024, 7th of July, the 9th of July, to look at what character qualities do I possess in the
Mm.
positive and in a negative. You see?
Mhm.
And so these 7 habits are very much qualities to develop, you know? And so judgment awareness, habit 2, Richard, for what you just shared as part of your um, life experience.
Mhm.
It's a very, very good habit for you to tap into. Again, the book is going to have, let me share this right here. It's actually going to have things like the inner judge
Mm.
and the inner critic, which is why, see, it's a diagram. What's
Mhm.
the difference? Which is why I encourage you to perhaps have both
Mhm.
the audio and definitely the book as well. Um, Also, in order to internalize those habits, I created these wonderful tools. So this is compassionate liberation for the high performer daily alignment cards.
Ah.
And never mind high performer is for any performer. and, and these cards, there's 54 cards, and there's 8 cards per habit. So they are meant to be practical. This is an entire organizational support system for you to come into alignment with these 7 character qualities, because this is as much as about personal, professional, and spiritual growth. So let's just say you want to work with habit 1, which is presence. You could pull out 8 presence cards and then just at random pull one card out each day of the week and work with that card and what it says on that card.
Mm.
in order to, again, it's about internalizing, because I realize my clients need something they can use on the run, so to speak, in the car or in the office, at home, when they need to refocus, because it's all about the pivot.
Mm.
And because of it, then we also created the planner that is based on the cards, on the book. And then we also created the workbook, which basically helps to break down the 7 habits. Again, all in order to simplify and to put it into practical application.
Mm.
So when you're talking and you were sharing this very personal example, a habit too, judgment awareness. One of the thing here is mindfulness, the instant judgment regulator or judgment awareness changes everything, right? You
Mm.
suddenly have judgment awareness. You're able to reach out, like the prior example you used, and you're able to apologize, right? You're just able to go, I'm just going to apologize. It's just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It's because of judgment dash awareness, right? So this collective system of the book, the workbook, the planner, the compassionate daily alignment cards are really a system to start to help the human to come into greater coherence, unison within your own personal internal climate as the external world is projecting
Mm.
chaos or whatever it is. So you can make your difference, because just as at the very beginning of our podcast, it's we all contribute to that.
Yeah.
We are all part of that. And
We
for
are.
those that are wanting to go deeper within their spirituality, the prior podcast with Richard, found on richarddugan.com, you can see here. The dolphin book, Lighting You Home, A Dolphin Stream of a New Earth. I am the narrator of that book. The other one I'm not, but
Vibrantlivingnow.org. That's vibrantlivingnow.com. I beg your pardon, .org. Vibrantlivingnow.org is the website we are going to be linked to. You can experience authentic whole life success and fulfillment. And if you're ready to become the captain of your own ship or expand your reach and level of influence, this particular book, High Performance Without Pain, will show you exactly how to do it as we've gone through those 7 different steps. We certainly hope you will go to that website. Again, it's vibrantlivingnow.org and find out more about the work that Daniela Booman is doing as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and I want to thank you so much, Daniela, for being here on the program again. It's been a remarkable experience and a learning experience. It's one of those aspects of the concept, if you will, of duality that I have sort of come to terms with. That there is no duality. There is no right or wrong, good or bad. They are learning experiences. And you might have contrasts. For example, the ones I just gave a few moments ago regarding the 2 different individuals that I've been working with. They are certainly different. They are certainly contrasting. But there was nothing wrong with either of them. They were what they were, but they were neither good nor bad. And I've always used the analogy of the macro universe and the micro universe. And you can watch it through a telescope, the macro universe, the cosmos, if you will, macrocosmos. And you can watch how things are, supernovas explode and comets and asteroids and crashing into this and doing that and all of these different things, right? But there's no judgment out there. None. So now you turn it inward, you look at through the microscope, and you're looking, say, through an electron microscope at the subatomic particles moving around and doing this and that and the other, and colliding and dividing and doing this and that and the other, and one consumes the other and continues to grow and da 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 da. And there's no judgment there either. Any more than I'd like to think there is no judgment in the natural world that we live in when it comes to the wildlife. Okay. Yeah, you have on the Serengeti plain, you have the wildebeest, what have you, or the giraffe and the lion, or whatever it is, the predator and prey, as we call it. That's just life. That is just the process that they go through. And I don't know if they're grateful. That doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is that's just the way that it is. It's neither right nor wrong. And yeah, there are people who get upset over watching that kind of activity. But, we do the same thing, but it's been sanitized considerably. We need to understand that this is just where we live and this is what we do. And I love some of those programs where people go off, they get off the grid and they go off for a weekend or a week or a month. They live out on their own and they hunt and so forth. And the one beautiful thing I see in most every single one of them is when the hunter has captured their prey, they kneel and they give thanks and they are grateful. Thank you for giving your life so that I can continue on. There's respect. And I think that that's what we need, not just towards the natural world, but towards one another. But even more importantly, Daniela, I think we need respect towards ourselves.
Yes,
I thank you.
because as
Go ahead.
that's beautifully said, because ultimately you and I are one.
Mhm.
It is the one self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Baha'is have a wonderful saying about the messengers of God. If you reject one of the messengers of God, you've rejected them all. If you accept one of the messengers of God, you have accepted them all. And here's the interesting twist. We're not just talking about holy men and avatars and so forth and gurus. We're all messengers. We're all messengers. And I thank
Yes.
you for bringing your message here to tell me your story.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was a pleasure as always to have a dialogue with you. I appreciate it so much.
You are
And
very
the work
welcome.
you're doing in the world.
Well, thank you. I do want to ask you three final questions that I ask all of my guests, whether they are
Okay.
returning or not. And I'll ask those. But first, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. And they're streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. We podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, many other locations. We're also on YouTube where you can watch these conversations, and I hope you will. I also hope that you'll subscribe and click notifications so that when I do post a new conversation, you'll be notified and you can tune in and listen in and be inspired and encouraged and educated. So please take the time to do that. If you'd like to be a part of the work that we are doing here on Tell Me Your Story and you'd like to support us financially, we would be gratefully appreciative. We have a PayPal account that's there for your security as well as ours. Put in the email address richard@richarddugan.com when they ask you to whom are you sending. That's richard@richarddugan.com. And spend some time going within and listening to that still small voice during this, the decade of perfect vision. And with all of that being said, we move to those three final questions we ask all of our guests on this program. And the first of those to our very special guest. Once again, the website, I want to give that out, vibrantlivingnow.org. And of course, the book that you can get through that website, whether it's the print or Audible, is High Performance Without Pain. My special guest, of course, here today has been Daniela Booman, and I want to thank you and ask you, who is Danielle Booman? Daniela Booman.
She is a radiant spirit of light reflecting back your own.
What gets you up in the morning?
purpose.
Mm. And what was your best day?
The day of my birth.
Mm. Well, Daniela, once again, thank you for being with us here on the program. And we do look forward to having you back again, because I know there's still a whole lot more we can talk about in this regard to
We could.
helping to raise the consciousness of self and others. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy, because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.